ultimately, what you're looking for is an organisation that has a proven track record for the type of projects that you're looking, the ability to deliver, that's cost effective, that has the necessary qualifications and experience of staff. I would hope that they've got a commitment to excellence and quality, not just do the minimum. There are good approved inspectors out there. There are bad approved inspectors out there. There are good local authorities. There are bad local authorities. So don't just assume that you can fall into the trap of one size fits all. And in particular, one of the points that was being made over there earlier is that there's something called for building control bodies, for approved inspectors, something called Reg 16. So Regulation 9, and that requires that you do not have a design conflict in the scheme. So I could not accept work on a scheme where I am designing any of it or I have a financial interest in that scheme, okay? Fairly logically, because there's a blatant conflict of interest there. There are, however, approved inspectors out there who are set up as a group, and within that design group, they have sub-companies who will then take on design functions, okay? I would personally be very wary of that, because who within that organisation is going to check the work of the person that's actually done it, okay? It's something that is generally frowned upon, and it's something that I expect will be, when they do the review of the building regulations, outlawed completely, or certainly ruled out. Sorry, gentlemen over there.
Inspector, and so you're doing a residential development on your own property, and you're given a building notice, would it be ethical for you to approve your own?
At the moment, small residential development on your own house is technically exempt under the regulation, but under the code of conduct, approved inspectors now turn around and are expected to decline that work. If it's literally you're looking at an extension on your own house, then it's not necessarily unacceptable for someone else within the organisation to do it, but it would be absolutely unacceptable for you as a person to inspect the work yourself.
Wasn't there the interesting case of BAA, the British Airports Authority, that had effectively an in-house building control team that did all of the work?
Yeah.
So the BAA, the airport developer, had, they did all the airport terminals, but they had their in-house
building control team. Yeah.
But they had they were financially separate from BAA, and therefore were allowed to do it.
I understand why it's ethically wrong to regulate work.
Yeah.
There should be more checks in place. Wouldn't it make sense to have a designer who has all the knowledge of building control?
It would make every sense to have a designer that has knowledge of building control, but not for them to then approve their own work. I mean, ultimately, it's the same as the risk of that to me is just too great. Okay.
It's just like a checking process.
It is a checking process. Well, one of the things that just to look at where this might go in the future, if we go down the line of BIM, okay, then effectively the computer software could actually then start to automatically check the regulations of compliance of the drawing against the regulation. Okay. So as you go forwards, okay, for schemes that are exactly matching what the regulation says, then I would say that there's every chance in the future the computer software will actually take over that checking process. Okay, building control will then be more focused on the site delivery side of it to make sure that what was checked, what was on the approved plans is actually what's built.
But there's always going to be some aspect.
There's always going to be. I'm bearing in mind that I have about 5 minutes left. I will just take us to this, okay? Because this is when it all goes horrendously wrong. This is where the system in the United Kingdom has failed us dramatically. This is obviously Grenfell Tower. There are somewhere in the region of 80 or so people who died, who were incinerated live on TV. Incinerated live on TV in that building, okay? Something went horrendously wrong with the building control and fire approval system in this country to have enabled that to happen, okay? There are if you do not build exactly what's on the plans and you don't have an approved plan in the first place, and you can make all the variations through the course of it, how do you know what's actually been built when people ask the question afterwards? In the days after Grenfell, all building control bodies were contacted and asked, do you know any buildings in your area that have got this particular type of cladding on it? Okay? Do you know how difficult it was for the vast majority of them to actually dig out the records as to what was actually installed on those buildings? Because the records aren't there. The records that you've got to keep for 15 years. And if you've got records that literally say works in progress, what use is that? Okay? So what you actually need is not the minimum in any of these things. It's to make sure that you've actually got a good record of it. You've got some photos, you've got some evidence, you've got some records, some delivery notes of what the cladding products were. Okay, with that kind of information, we can actually avoid this kind of thing. Okay, both Grenfell and Lakenhall House were both inspected by the local authority and both owned by the local authority. As an approved inspector, you wouldn't have been able to do that. However, because of the way that the system currently works, there is no reason why that an approved inspector couldn't have signed off on one of those buildings. Okay, because it's just as simple for them to have made the same mistakes. So I'm not drawing a comparison between the local authority inspection of these buildings or the approved inspector. What I would do is say that there's something horrendously wrong with the system that enables us to be in a position where whichever building control body had done it, they wouldn't have guaranteed that the plans that were actually approved were the plans that were built or had records of what was actually installed on those particular buildings. And on that happy note, as we bring this particular talk to an end, and I'm going to hand over shortly to a colleague in local authority who will present you their side of it. Are there any last questions that you have for me at all?
If you didn't stipulate that you wanted the site inspection reports at the beginning of your contracting them, would you be able to? Are you legally allowed to ask for them?
There's nothing stopping you asking for them. There's no legal entitlement to have them.
So they can turn around and say no.
Yeah, and I have seen records produced at the end of a scheme that literally were just a list of the dates that inspections were carried out and what stage it was at. So literally, this project had 12 inspections. It had the damp-proof course inspection on the 27th of March.
So it'd be up to you when you're approaching them to say we want detailed reports.
If that's what you want, then that's what you should ask for, because with all of this, if you don't ask, you don't get.
And to what Tony said about BAA having their own inspectors, that almost, do you think that developers would almost be like competent persons here and their own inspectors? Could that be a conflict where there's like minded financial issues or time issues that put them under pressure to make wrong decisions?
I'm personally against anything that looks like that. Obviously, ultimately, it's down to governments to make those decisions as to what they want and what they don't want. There was a suggestion in something called the Future of Building Control document a few years ago, which referred to something called an appointed person. And the appointed person would be like a CDM coordinator, if anyone knows the generality of that role. So there'd be a person who had the responsibility for ensuring the competence of everyone that was working on it and would liaise between building control and the contractor. I would personally support that. I'd also support a system where competent contractors could have a lower level of inspection than non-competent contractors, but they would provide records of all of the things that we're going through. So for example, I wouldn't need to go out and do as much detailed checks of fire stopping if I was given a log by the contractor of all the locations where they had installed the fire stopping with a certificate number and a photographic record of it. So it takes the requirement off of us, and all you're doing then is you're going through and going, yes, this is looking like it's...
I did a lot of work on a sort of a late 80s built site, for extension work and things like that, and no cabin insulation in half these buildings at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's just been left out because of the cost. Obviously, some were inspected.
Yeah, and some weren't.
Some weren't.
Yeah, and in most cases, that's the way it's going to be, because whether you use the local authority inspector or an approved inspector, they're probably only going to do a sampling, because the cost of actually having a greater level than that, building regulations are literally the minimum that you need to do. And if contractors are going to be dishonest, I mean, the flip to that is, on many occasions, I've gone in and I've seen a fire door installed. Fortunately, I've taken a photograph of the fire door installed, and then subsequently there's a fire in the building and it's a different door. Because they've actually put it in, you've gone along, signed it off, and go, right, he's gone out the door, now we can have the door we want.
You can only record what you see.
So you can only record what you can see.
Right.
So it's to what extent building control will ever control anything, and ultimately it does require a degree of honesty in the construction industry.
But isn't implementing that helpful because there'll have to be some compliance on obviously building regulations like fuel energy for all the buildings.
Yeah, but if you've got 500 houses to build, and you're going to pitch insulation out of 400 of them, that's almost built up house cost of that.
Okay then.
It's honesty, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. And unfortunately, I mean, in the same way that we police this country, we police the country on the basis of a bit of trust and of acceptance. For those of you that